We all have ghosts from our past that follow us into the bright lights of the present. Explore the haunting stories of what we leave behind and the memories that refuse to fade away over time. Hit subscribe now and help us face the ghosts of the past.
The phone call came on a Tuesday morning, which is strange because I remember thinking, who delivers news like this on a Tuesday? My wife's attorney, a man named Philip Ostrander, had a voice like someone who'd spent 30 years delivering bad news and had simply stopped feeling it. He said my wife's name. He said the word past. He said there were matters pertaining to the estate that required my attention. And somewhere in the middle of all that, he mentioned a property, a cabin, in the mountains outside Asheville, North Carolina. I said, "I'm sorry, what cabin?" He paused, just briefly, the way people pause when they realize they've said something the other person wasn't supposed to know yet. "The property at Elk Ridge Road," he said. "Your wife purchased it and listed you as the sole beneficiary. We'll need you to come in and sign the transfer documents." I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not a chair. The floor. I don't know why. My wife, Gloria, had died 11 days earlier. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in March, gone by September. 6 months. We'd been married for 31 years. I was 63 years old. I thought I knew everything about her. I did not know about any cabin. Let me tell you about Gloria. She was the kind of woman who kept a running grocery list magnetized to the refrigerator at all times. She bounced the checkbook by hand every month, even after I showed her the banking app 3 times. She called her mother every Sunday at 2 p.m. without fail. She was organized, she was transparent, she was, I believed, an open book. We met in Knoxville in 1991. She was a school teacher, I was working construction management. We built a life that was ordinary in the best possible way. A house in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, 3 kids, summer vacations to the same lake in Georgia every year because the kids loved the rope swing and we loved watching them love it. We did not have secrets. That was something I would have told anyone who asked. I would have been wrong. The attorney's office was downtown Nashville, 20 minutes from our house. When I walked in, Philip Ostrander was already standing, which I took as a gesture of respect, or possibly sympathy. He was younger than his voice suggested. He shook my hand and led me to a conference room that smelled like leather and old paper. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was the deed to a piece of land, 14 acres on Elk Ridge Road, outside Asheville. A log cabin, built 1987, renovated 2019, purchased by Gloria Ann Whitfield, my wife's name, in the spring of 2017. 8 years ago. We'd still been taking those lake vacations in 2017. I'd been building a deck on the back of the house in 2017. I had absolutely no memory of any cabin. "She never mentioned it to you?" Philip asked, and his tone was careful in the way that told me he already knew the answer. "No," I said. "She never mentioned it." He nodded slowly. "She gave specific instructions that the property be transferred to you upon her passing. She also left a letter." He slid a second envelope across the table, this one sealed with Gloria's handwriting on the front, for Franklin. "Open at the cabin." I looked at my name written in her hand and had to look away for a moment. "Is there anything else I should know?" I asked. Philip folded his hands on the table. "There's a caretaker," he said, "a man named Arthur Briggs. He's been maintaining the property for the past 6 years. He's aware you'll be coming." I drove home with the envelope on the passenger seat. I didn't open it. She'd said to open it at the cabin, and I don't know why, but that felt important to honor. I told my kids that weekend. My oldest son, Preston, is 41. He works in finance in Atlanta, does very well for himself, has 2 kids of his own. He arrived at the house Saturday morning with his wife, Tamara, and I could tell from the way he walked in, that particular set of his shoulders, that he was already in problem-solving mode. My daughter, June, drove down from Louisville. She's 38. She teaches the same grade Gloria used to teach, which was always a thing that made Gloria quietly proud. June cried when I showed her the deed. She kept touching the paper like it would tell her something. My youngest, Owen, is 34. He lives 40 minutes away, and had already heard something from Preston, because that's how it works with those two. Information travels. Owen sat at the kitchen table and didn't say much, which isn't unusual for Owen, but the silence felt heavier than normal. I explained what I knew. The cabin, the 8 years, the attorney, the letter I hadn't opened. Preston said, "How much is it worth?" I said I didn't know. He said, "We should find out." June said, "Preston," he said, "I'm just saying it's an asset. There are practical questions." I said, "There are, and I'll handle them." I looked at all 3 of them. I'm going to drive up there next week. I want to see it for myself. I want to read her letter there like she asked. Preston opened his mouth, closed it. Then, "Dad, don't you think we should come with you, as a family?" I thought about that. I thought about the way Gloria had written my name on that envelope. Only my name, and I said, "Not this time." Owen looked at the table. June looked at her hands. Preston looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. I drove to Asheville alone on a Wednesday morning. The GPS took me off the highway and onto smaller and smaller roads until I was climbing switchbacks through forest that smelled like pine resin and wet stone. The leaves were just starting to turn. It was early October, and the light came through in long pieces between the trees. It was, even through everything I was feeling, genuinely beautiful. Elk Ridge Road was unpaved. The cabin sat back from the road behind a wooden gate, and when I got out to unlatch it, I could hear a creak somewhere below. The air was different here. Cooler. Quieter. Arthur Briggs was waiting on the porch. He was a lean man, somewhere in his early 70s, with the kind of tan you only get from working outside for decades. He had a short white beard and watchful eyes. He stood when I pulled up, and when I got out of the truck, he walked over and held out his hand and said, "Mr. Whitfield, Arthur Briggs. Your wife spoke about you often." That hit me somewhere I wasn't prepared for. "She did?" I said. "Often," he said again quietly. "Come on. I'll show you around." I don't know what I expected. Something modest, maybe. A retreat, a getaway, something that could be explained as a little indulgence Gloria never got around to telling me about. What I found was not that. The cabin was beautiful. I mean that in a way that embarrasses me to say because it sounds like it's about the money, but it's not. The logs were old growth, dark with age, and the renovation had been done with care. The kind of care where you can tell someone spent real time thinking about what the place should feel like, not just what it should look like. A stone fireplace, wide plank floors, a back porch that faced east toward a ridgeline covered in birch and oak. A kitchen that was actually functional, not decorative. And then there were the small things. A quilt on the reading chair that I recognized. Gloria's grandmother had made it, a shelf of books that were all hers, titles I'd seen on her nightstand over the years. A framed photograph on the windowsill, our whole family at the lake. The kids young, Gloria laughing at something out of frame. She had been here. Many times. She had brought pieces of her real life here and made this place feel like home. I sat down in the reading chair and I didn't move for a while. Arthur came in eventually and made coffee without asking if I wanted any. He set a mug on the table beside me and sat across the room. "How long did you know her?" I asked. 6 years, he said. She'd come up, usually a few days at a time. Spring and fall mostly. Sometimes winter, when the snow wasn't too bad for the roads. Did she ever say why she bought it? He was quiet for a moment, the way people are when they're choosing words carefully. "She said she needed a place to think," he said. "She said she wasn't running from anything. She said she wanted somewhere that was hers, just hers." I looked at the quilt on the chair. She never told me. "I know," he said. "She knew that would be hard for you to hear." I opened the letter on the back porch just before sunset. Gloria's handwriting was small and precise. She'd been left-handed, and the letters always leaned slightly against the natural direction, like she was pushing into a wind. "Franklin, I know this is strange. I know you're sitting there wondering why. I've been trying to figure out how to explain it for years, and I still don't have a clean answer, which is so unlike me that it would make you laugh if you weren't so hurt right now. I bought this place the spring after your mother died. You remember that year. You were grieving and working too hard, and I was trying to hold everything together, and I realized, somewhere in the middle of all of it, that I had never in my adult life had a room of my own. Not a real one. Somewhere I could be just Gloria, not Mom, not wife, not the one who keeps the list on the refrigerator. I want you to understand that was never about you. It was about me needing to find out who I was when nobody needed anything from me. I came up here and I read books and I walked the creek and I sat on that porch and I figured some things out. I should have told you. I know that. The longer I waited, the harder it became to explain, and then it became this thing I'd kept too long, and I didn't know how to hand it to you without it becoming something it wasn't. This place was never a secret from you. It was a gift I kept too long before I gave it. I'm giving it to you now. Do what you want with it. Sell it if that's what you need. But I hope you'll go out on that back porch first and just sit for a while. I used to think about you up here. I thought about how much you would love it if I could ever find the right moment to bring you. I love you. I'm sorry I made you find out this way. I hope you can forgive a woman who loved your family so much she forgot to figure out when to let them in. Gloria. I sat on that porch until it was fully dark, and the stars came out and the creek below was the only sound. I didn't cry until I went back inside and saw the quilt. I stayed 3 days. Arthur showed me the property boundaries, the trail down to the creek, the small meadow at the back of the land where deer came in the evenings. He was not a man who talked for the sake of talking, and I appreciated that more than I knew how to say. We had dinner together the second night. He brought venison chili from his place down the road, and he told me about his own wife, who'd passed 6 years before Gloria hired him, and about his son who lived out west, and about how the work had been good for him, the regularity of it. She was a good person, he said, and it wasn't a platitude. He said it the way you say something. You mean flat and certain. She was, I said. I drove home on Friday. Preston called before I'd even gotten off the highway. He didn't ask how the trip was. He asked whether I'd had the property appraised. I told him I hadn't. He said, Dad, I looked it up. Properties on that road are going for significant money. With 14 acres and an updated structure, we're probably talking somewhere between 400,000 and 600,000. Maybe more depending on the market. That's real money. That's not something to just sit on. I said, I'm aware it's real money. So you're thinking about selling? I said. I'm thinking about a lot of things. He said, I'm just trying to help you think practically. You're not exactly in a position where... He stopped himself. Where what? A pause. Where you can afford to be sentimental. I let that sit between us for a moment. Then I said, Preston, your mother left that property to me. I'll make whatever decision I make, and I'll make it when I'm ready. He was quiet. Then, okay. Thank you for caring about me, I said. I know that's what this is. He made a sound that might have been agreement. June called 2 days later. Her call was different. She said, I've been thinking about Mom. About the cabin, and I think I understand her. I said, tell me. She was always taking care of everybody, June said. Even when she was sick, she was asking about my class, Owen's job, your back. She never stopped. I think that place was the one corner of her life where she got to just stop. A pause. Does that make sense? Yes, I said. That's almost exactly what she wrote in the letter. June was quiet. Then, can I come up with you sometime? To see it? I'd like that, I said. Owen texted me that same week. Just 3 sentences. I'm not going to pretend I'm not thrown off by all this, but she was Mom. Whatever she needed is okay with me. I sat with that text for a long time. The harder conversation came 10 days after I got back, when Preston asked to meet for dinner. Just the 2 of us. He chose a restaurant that was nicer than the situation called for, which is a Preston thing. He's always been more comfortable talking about difficult things if the setting is controlled. We ordered. He waited until the food came to say what he'd actually come to say. I want to be honest with you, he said. Go ahead. I think you should sell the cabin. He held up one hand before I could respond. Hear me out. You're 63. The house in Murfreesboro is paid off, but your retirement savings are. He hesitated. They're fine, but they're not what they should be. $400,000 to $600,000 changes your situation in a real way. You could travel. You could stop worrying. That's what Mom would want, isn't it? For you not to worry? He said it like it was reasonable. And it was, on the surface. It was exactly the kind of thing a person says when they're dressing up one agenda to sound like another. I looked at my son across the table. This man I had rocked to sleep. This man I had driven to 3 different states for baseball tournaments. This man whose college tuition had been, in fact, a real stretch. And I tried to separate what I was feeling from what was actually true. "Preston," I said, "is this about my retirement, or is it about whether there's an inheritance?" The silence that followed told me everything. "That's not fair," he said, but his voice had gone tight. "I'm not trying to be unfair," I said. "I'm trying to understand what we're actually talking about." He put his fork down. "I have 2 kids in private school. Tamara and I are stretched. I'm not going to pretend that a potential windfall isn't something I've thought about." At least he said it plainly. "I'll give him that. Your mother left that property to me," I said. "Not because she didn't love you, because it was something between her and me. And I'm going to make a decision about it when I'm ready, based on what feels right to me and what I think she would have wanted, not based on anyone else's financial situation." His jaw tightened. "So you're saying there's no—" "I'm not saying anything about what happens eventually," I said. "I'm saying right now, tonight, I need you to respect that this is my decision." We finished dinner without saying much. He paid the check, which surprised me. At the door, he hugged me, stiffly but genuinely, and said, "I love you, Dad. I'm sorry." "I know you do," I said. "I love you too." I went back to the cabin in November. The leaves were gone by then, and without them, the view from the back porch was longer. You could see further into the valley, all the way to a ridge that was blue-gray in the morning light. Arthur came by the first morning with firewood, and we built a fire in the stone fireplace. And I made coffee, and we sat and didn't need to fill the silence. I had brought a few things from home. A photograph of Gloria and me from our 20th anniversary, a book she'd been halfway through when she died. I marked her page and put it on the shelf with the others where it belonged. I thought about what she had written. A gift I kept too long before I gave it. I understood it now, in a way I hadn't been able to in the attorney's office, or on the drive up, or even reading the letter. She had needed something that was entirely hers, not because she loved us less, because she needed to know that she existed outside of us, that Gloria was a full person, not just a function. And she had been afraid that if she told me, I would make it into something it wasn't. I would feel shut out. I would worry. I would, probably, have wanted to come visit, and then it would have become a family thing, and it would have stopped being hers. She was probably right. That stings a little, still. But I've made my peace with it. I am not selling the cabin. I made that decision on the second morning of that November trip, sitting on the back porch with coffee, watching a pair of deer move through the meadow at the far edge of the property. Gloria had watched those same deer, or their parents, or the deer before that. She had sat in the same cold air and thought about things I'll never fully know. The cabin is mine now. But it's still hers too, in every way that matters. I told Preston at Christmas. I told him I was keeping the property, that I was going up several times a year, that I was not in financial trouble and did not require his concern on that front, and that I loved him and his family and looked forward to seeing the grandkids more often if he'd allow it. He was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. "Okay, Dad." It wasn't a warm moment, but it was an honest one. June came up with me in February. We snowshoed down to the creek, and she cried and laughed and said, "I can feel her here." And I said, "Me too," because it was true. Owen hasn't come up yet, but he texted last week and asked about a spring trip, and I said yes before I'd even finished reading the message. People ask me sometimes, now that I've told a few friends the story, whether I'm angry at Gloria, whether I feel deceived. I've thought about that a lot. The honest answer is yes, for about 2 weeks after I found out. There were nights in those early days when the fact of the secret felt like a wall she'd built between us, and I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what else I hadn't known, wondering if the life we'd built was as solid as I'd believed. But then I read the letter again, and I thought about all the ways I knew her, the grocery list, the Sunday calls, the way she always knew when one of the kids needed her before they said a word, the way she held my hand in the car without thinking about it, just reached over, the way she spent the last weeks of her life making sure everyone around her was going to be okay. She had one room of her own, one private corner in a life she gave to everyone else. I don't think I get to be angry about that. Not anymore. What I feel now, when I sit on that back porch and watch the valley go from gray to gold in the morning light, is something I don't have a clean word for. It's grief and gratitude wound together so tightly I can't separate them. I miss her. I miss her every single day, but I go up to that cabin and I sit in her chair and I read her books and I watch her deer, and I feel, in some way I can't quite explain, like she's still in the middle of telling me something. I'm listening, Gloria. I'm finally listening. I've been asked if I think Gloria was wrong. People hear the story and they want a verdict. They want me to say she betrayed me, or they want me to say she was completely justified. One or the other, clean and simple. And I understand that impulse, but I've lived long enough to know that most of the things that actually matter don't resolve that cleanly. What I keep coming back to is this. The choices we make about what to hold on to and what to share have consequences we don't always see coming. Gloria held on to her cabin because she was afraid of what sharing it would cost her. Her privacy, her solitude. The one place where nobody needed anything from her. And that choice had a cost too. Just a different one. It cost us 8 years of something we could have discovered together. It cost me 8 years of knowing her more completely. Those years don't come back. I don't say that to blame her. I say it because I think it's true, and I think it's worth sitting with. The things we keep secret from the people we love, even for understandable reasons, even with good intentions, those things don't just stay contained. They shape the relationship around them, like a stone under a rug. You don't see it, but you feel the unevenness every time you walk across the room. And then there's Preston, my son, who I love, who sat across from me at a nice restaurant and asked me to sell my wife's cabin in language dressed up as concern for my retirement. I wasn't angry at him, truly, because I could see, underneath all of it, a man under real pressure trying to find a solution in the wrong place. But what I kept thinking was, the moment you start calculating what you're owed before the grief has even settled, that's a moment that costs you something. Not in any abstract sense, in the very specific sense that it changes how people see you, including people who love you. Preston is a smart man. I think he understood that by the end of dinner. What saved everything, what I keep returning to, is the letter. Not because it explained everything perfectly. It didn't. But because Gloria chose honesty at the end, even when she wasn't there to face the consequences. She could have said nothing. She could have left the property to me with no explanation, and let me make whatever sense of it I could. Instead, she sat down and told me the truth, that she had needed something of her own, that she had been afraid of how I would receive it, that she had waited too long and knew it. That took courage, the quiet, private kind of courage that nobody sees but that costs something real to produce. I think about that when I'm up at the cabin now, about what it takes to tell the truth about yourself to someone you love, even when, especially when, it's not a flattering truth. It's one of the harder things. It requires a kind of honesty that goes beyond just not lying. It requires being willing to be known, fully, even the parts that are complicated or embarrassing or hard to explain. Gloria knew who she was. She knew what she needed. She built herself a place to exist in, quietly and on her own terms. I respect that more than I can say. I just wish she'd trusted me with it sooner. And I've spent some time thinking about where I've done the same thing. Held something back. Waited for the right moment. Let the moment pass. Because I don't think she was the only one. That back porch faces east. Every morning I'm up there. The light comes up slow over that ridge, and the valley goes from dark to gold. And for a few minutes, everything is very quiet and very clear. I don't know what to call what I feel in those moments, but I know it's real, and I know Gloria knew it was there waiting, and I think she always meant to show me. She just ran out of time. So now I go for both of us.